Welcome back to the Are We Nearly There Yet podcast. My name is Sonia and it's so great to have you join us on this journey of parenting and family life. This week I sat down and had a conversation with Ben Oliver. We talked about boundaries in parenting. We talked about having an emotionally healthy response as a parent, and also we talked about what it's like for him living in a house full of females. We hope you enjoy this week's conversation. Hey, so this week I'm joined by Ben Oliver. Welcome, Ben.
Hello.
It's great to have you with us on the Are We Nearly There Yet podcast. Ben, lots of people listening will know who you are, but why don't you just tell us who family is to you? And by that I mean who your family is now and who family was to you growing up.
So I'm married to Becky.
Yeah.
Becky and I have been married for 20 years. We both come from families which have 3 children in each. And then we have 3 children too. So we've got 3 girls and they're aged between 11 and 15 now. But those 3 girls have grown up as part of Kerith Community Church. So we moved here really early on in our marriage, and we've been part of it all of that time as well. So yes, so lots of cousins, lots of aunties and uncles, grandparents still around and play an active role. No one lives in the same city or town, so there's quite a lot of travel at times, and holidays are often visiting other parts of the family and so on. But lots of similar aged kids. The furthest afield that stretches is Australia. I've got a sister who lives out there with her 2 boys, and they get on fantastically with their cousins, but we don't see them very often, as you can imagine. So yeah, wide and quite large.
And growing up, where were you in the family in terms of siblings and things?
Well, I was in the most important position, in the middle.
Oh, middle child.
Yeah, the middle child. In fact, both Becky and I are both middle children, and we've both got an older sister and a younger sister. So she's one of 3 girls, I've got 3 girls, and I only had sisters. So I've been surrounded by girls all my life, as I like to say.
Wow, yes. So whereabouts were you when you were growing up?
I grew up in Suffolk, rural Suffolk, a beautiful town you should visit called Woodbridge.
I know it.
You know it well. Near the mighty Ipswich Town.
That's where I was born, Ben. Ipswich.
Oh, wow. And so we're both Ipswich Town supporters, obviously.
Yeah, but we don't shout about it.
No, I'm not a very vocal one of those.
No.
So Suffolk is beautiful. You've got the sea and beaches, you've got woodlands, lots of farmland, you've got coastal estuary rivers where I learnt to sail, and I grew up in a lovely town which is well worth a visit.
Very good. Well, I'm sure everyone will be looking straight up on Airbnb and everywhere where to stay for the next
we actually went back there this year in the summer, which I haven't done for years and years. I mean, we've been for Christmas and we've been at other times, but haven't been in the summer. And so I introduced my girls to paddleboarding on the river and swimming and mucking around. And someone lent us a boat from my parents' church to sail for the day. So we had a great time doing that. They're like, Dad, I cannot believe you grew up here and now you're raising us in Bracknell. They don't think that's fair somehow. I'm like, Bracknell's got the forest, it's got the shop. You don't understand, kids. I didn't have a McDonald's until I was about 14 years old. There is no McDonald's in Woodbridge. So they've got their own things that they appreciate about Bracknell as well.
Yeah, and when you're growing up somewhere pretty, you don't always appreciate it anyway, do you? When I was growing up there, and then actually we moved to the New Forest area when I was 12, another beautiful area. And then, yeah, I was like, this is so boring, there's nothing to do. And now I drive back and I'm like, this is picturesque. It's amazing. So,
that's exactly it.
So for anyone that doesn't know, do you want to tell them a little bit about what you do for work outside of the home?
Yeah, well, right now I am working for the church. I'm employed by the church full time. We have a job we call executive pastor, and that's what I do. So that is, I look after the office team, we call it. It's the staff team, but there's also some volunteers as well. That's anyone who gives at least a day a week to working in the office, although we're all based at home at the moment, obviously, but working in the office to support all that we do as a church. So I help the elders and trustees and Simon, our senior pastor, with the decisions, and then I help the teams put those decisions into action. So yeah, I hope that explains my job.
And you recently became one of the elders yourself, didn't you?
Yes, I
How long ago was that?
2 hats. Yeah. I mean, that doesn't. I think I'd have to ask Simon. I think I could carry on being an elder even if I left the staff.
Yeah,
Like an
separate.
employed position. So yeah, the elders are the team that meet, particularly thinking about the strategic direction of the church, the pastoral care, make sure everyone's being well loved. And then if there are any kind of theology questions that come up, or more likely doctrine stuff. So how are we going to do this in our church in light of our understanding of what the Bible has to say? So that's the team that will look at those things, yeah.
It's a bit of a kind of fatherly role over the church, fatherly role over the office team, and a bit of, obviously, a fatherly role in your own home. So you mentioned about being dad to 3 girls. You grew up around girls. You've always been around girls. How is it then, Ben, being the only man in a house of women?
I actually love it.
Do you?
I actually love it. Yeah, because my jokes are the funniest. I get all the affection and the hugs. There's no competition about who's the strongest or who's the tallest. You can eat 2 puddings because I'm twice the size of anybody else. I'm no longer twice the height, so now we've had to go to weight. And I think, that as they're growing up, I'm losing that argument as well. So I'm having to come up with new excuses as to why I can have 2 or twice as much pudding as anybody else. But no, I do. I genuinely love it. I did when we were expecting kids. I was thinking, it'd be lovely to have a boy and a girl. It would be great to have the mix. And the girls ask me that from time to time. Oh, would you swap us? And of course, no.
Yeah.
No one would swap their children. And I said, well, the idea of having a boy and a girl was attractive to me, but no one's taking you away from me. Now I know that you are a person. I'm not changing you for the world. And I actually know it's lovely. We did have a cat for a year. He was
okay.
So I felt that. But I was, one of my saddest moments in recent years was when he got run over. Yeah, he ended up having to be put down. So, we've tried having boys, but they don't last very long.
I wonder, are there any challenges that come with being the only male in the house? Or is it all good plain sailing?
I guess nobody else understands some of the things that I might face. But I think that would be true whether I had sons or daughters, in the dad role. One time we played a game, I think there was like an extra brownie or something that needed eating. And we said, okay, whoever can convince the rest of the family that their position in our family is the worst one, then you can have the brownie. And no one believed any of my challenges as the dad. They're like, absolutely not. You don't have the hardest part. Yours is the easy. But it's things like sometimes you can feel like if anything breaks anywhere, it's my job to fix it, and I should know how to fix it. Okay. Or you're like the chief problem solver in our family dynamic anyway. So it kind of can come to me, this is broken, and suddenly I should drop everything in order to fix that thing. Sometimes it might be, I tend to be emotionally quite steady, don't have the same ups and downs. And so it's almost then becomes expected of you that you'll be that. And so it's shocking, or you don't feel like you could have an up or a down because everyone else is relying on you not having an up or a down. Those things might be some of the pressures. One of my daughters loves football, so I've been able to help take them along, originally play with them, and now they're getting better than me. They can tackle me really well. She's part of a team, local team, just take them along, and I get to run the sidelines as a linesman for them and just engage just like that, as I may have dreamt of doing with a son. But now the opportunities that our daughters get are so much better than when I was a kid, for it to be equal. So I really don't feel like I'm missing out at all. I talked to Becky, my wife, her dad. He's a dad of 3 girls, and he said that when his girls found boyfriends and then went on to be married, it's like we were the sons that he was waiting for, and he didn't have to do all of the annoying early on nappy changing or anything else. Someone else is raising my sons for me right now, and I will meet them one day, and we'll have a great relationship. And that's another helpful way of thinking about it.
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? People have this perception, like if a woman that has boys, that she would be longing for a daughter, and the same, the opposite way around. But actually, just grateful for healthy children, aren't you? And yeah, either way, the children, they're people.
Yeah.
They're not just their gender.
No, that's right. That is right. They're people, and through serving in church, like all my life, I've helped out in kids' work since I was a teenager, for example. So then you've always had an input into boys and girls.
Yeah.
That's like learning to be a dad, and that continues in a different vein in the roles that I've got. Just love pouring wisdom into people, especially when they listen and do something about it, and it does them good. That makes me very happy. So that really does pull on those fathering desires that God's put in me.
So Ben, a lot of parenting is to do with setting boundaries, whether that's like our own boundaries in terms of the time we give to our children, whether that's like setting boundaries for our children. I observe you and Becky as two very boundaried, really healthily boundaried people.
I was going to say, is that in a positive way?
No, in a positive way. And in terms of how you approach like the office team and your role at Kerith, but also like anecdotes you've shared at times about your family life. So I'd just love to know a little bit about that. How does that setting of boundaries, how does that outwork itself within your home and your family life? Got any tips for anyone that finds it harder to keep to good boundaries?
Yeah, that's a hard to answer about your own family culture, isn't it? I think someone who came and watched, they would point them out. I mean, we've had people that we've helped in the past. I remember before we had children, actually, but we had someone who had a lot of life challenges, and they stayed with us for a bit. And when they left, one of the things they said that was remarkable to them was the fact that we sat down together and ate 3 times a day. And that was time that you had together, and they wanted to take that forward into their family life ongoing. So, I mean, that's like a really, really simple thing that I wouldn't have thought was unique or special in any way at all. But actually now my children are telling me that their friends also don't have that experience. I mean, just a simple boundary that says we all sit down together and we eat together. And then we set boundaries like, one person talks at once so that the rest of us can listen. And we don't move on until they've had a good chance to say not just what happened, but how they felt about what happened, or what they think a good idea might be to do next about what happened. That kind of an opportunity to be heard. We both had that growing up, so for us that was totally natural. And some people might say that feels like, oh, you're being restrictive. I can't believe we've got to sit down and eat together and you're going to make us do that. I'm just talking about this as an example, but it goes for all boundaries. But actually, our daughter's friends want to come. Yeah. They want to come around our house. They want to sit around the table. And although they find it awkward when I ask them how their day was, just like I would my own daughters, they actually want to come back and they love it. They tell our kids that we're strict. They feel like that we are strict, but we're also fun. And so that's how they would reflect. We don't think we're that strict, but our kids tell us we are. So I'm sure your kids tell you the same thing, Sonia.
Yeah. I think our meal times are probably slightly more wild than yours from your description. I might be having too little.
They're quite loud. I think that's me being a bloke. I just keep repeating, I'm limited. I am a man. I can only do one thing at once. I can only listen to one conversation at once. And sometimes questions or comments can be flying in from all over the place. I just can't handle it. So, that's probably me.
The strict side, I think there's something about being a Christian parent, which means we're going to have maybe tighter boundaries or different boundaries than maybe parents who don't have the same value system as us. And yeah, how do you navigate that with your children then when they are saying, you're too strict on this issue, or, you're not giving me enough freedom with this? How do you navigate that conversation in terms of with set apart from world, not of the world, those kind of conversations? Have you got an example of?
I do. You know what? The best advice I ever got on this is from a book. I can't remember the name of the book. I'll get it to you so we can add it on later. It's a Patrick Lencioni book. Surprise, surprise. The reason I say that is because Sonia knows he writes some really helpful stuff for values in organisations.
Yeah.
But he has a big family. I think they got 4 kids. And his wife said to him once, our family is just chaotic. People are running all over the place for all these different activities and so on. What would happen if you ran our family a bit more like you teach organisations to run, and do it around shared values and things like that? And it really got him thinking. It's like, what a brilliant thought. And he writes the story of that in this book, and comes up with some helpful tips. And one of them is that you need to agree your values as a family. What makes your family different from another family? Yeah. And primarily, if you're married, that's a husband and wife, but you also involve the children in that. And then once the family unit's agreed, this is what makes us different. So one of the things for us is we're not reliant on other people to inject the fun. We bring the fun. Like, so, you know, you might end up in a situation where you wouldn't choose. You know, you're on a walk which isn't that great, or it's not your favorite choice. You'd rather do something else, or the people that you'd like to be with are not actually with you. And it's about that value of saying, no, we bring the fun. So we're going to have fun no matter who's here, no matter what other mood somebody else is in. We're going to make the best of it. We're going to put the waterproofs on. We're going to jump in the sea. We're going to bring a paddleboard, even though it takes an injection of energy to perhaps launch into that. That's like one of our family values. So it helps you go, okay, this is what we are willing to have a battle over, and then we don't need to worry about the other stuff. It helps explain to the kids why we are different. And over time, you can point out the things that they enjoy about your family are because of those values. And so that's why we set boundaries around those things, because this is who we are. And another one of our ones would be that it's God first. Like we're here to honor and serve him. And so sometimes that will be the reason why we might make a different choice to somebody else. So yeah, I don't know if that helps. We are starting to get comments again from our kids' friends who are saying, we had one recently who said this: I always thought of your family as being really strict, but now I realize why you do it. It's because your parents love you, and I wish my parents had been a bit more strong with me and their sibling as well, because we don't really know what we can and can't do, but I can see that you guys do, and that's healthy. So I thought, wow, that's wisdom from a teenager spotting it from the outside. I didn't anticipate that early on, but it's a real encouragement to think we're doing something, you know, that aspect of it is okay.
Yeah. Before I worked for Kerith, I worked for a charity, and I was managing a supported lodgings project for homeless teenagers between 16, 17, 18 years old. And a lot of them found themselves homeless because of breakdown in the family. And actually they'd had so much freedom, they'd never really had boundaries. So they would then move into another family home, all of a sudden have this new set of, you know, values and boundaries to live within. And actually they would push against it to start with, but very quickly they'd realize that this is actually really good for them. It's healthy for them. It's what they will thrive within the safety of that boundary, more than just having free reign to go and do anything they like everywhere they like. So it's really key, isn't it? And I love that you know, as a family, you've kind of chosen your own rules. You know, your not rules. What was the
values?
Values, yeah.
I've remembered the name of the book, by the way.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah.
I highly recommend it. It's called The 3 Big Questions for a Frantic Family. It's got a story in it, and then it moves on to the lessons part of it. Its subtitle is it's about restoring sanity to the most important organisation in your life.
That's brilliant. That's really good. I'll check that one out. We love a book recommendation on here.
Yeah, well, I actually read one that you had been recommended by one of your previous guests.
Oh, okay.
Suzanne Whitten recommended a brilliant book. The title was so good, I just had to get it, about having teenagers. Parenting teenagers.
Something about going into town or something like that. Yeah.
It's like, Mum, or something like, Mum and Dad, get out of my life, but can you take me and Alex into town first?
Yeah.
I was like, that was perfect. So yeah, really helpful.
Well, talking about books, I know that you're quite a champion for emotionally healthy spirituality, a course that we run, and there's books as well, obviously. a course that we run at Kerith. So can you tell us a little bit about that and how that translates to your experience as a parent? Being an emotionally healthy dad, what
Yeah.
does it look like for you?
Yeah. Well, it just quickly about the course. It comes from a couple who realized there was a lot of dysfunction in their marriage, in their family life, and that was carrying over into their work. Their work happened to be being a pastor leading a church in New York. And the dysfunction eventually caught up with them and hit a breakdown moment. And they realized we can't carry on serving God in this way without actually being mature in our relationship with him or our relationship with one another. And so that kicked off this journey. And the books contain some of that story, but really it's about some practical ways that we can do a number of practices that help us with two different things. Firstly, how do we slow down to be with Jesus more in our life? So things like Sabbath, keeping a day a week different, separate, free from work, in order to delight in God and spend time with family and that kind of thing. It also includes time alone with God in prayer, that kind of stuff. So that's all under that category, slowing down to be with Jesus. And then the other part of it is like a load of emotionally mature practices and awareness of yourself. So things like how to listen well with other people, how to name your own feelings, like find out what's going on inside of you. Things like realizing how much of our past is shaping our present reactions to circumstances. So that's the kind of skills that you're picking up on that course. I've personally found that super helpful. I wouldn't say that I had a big training and natural background in any of this stuff. So naming emotions is not something that we did in my growing up family whatsoever. It was about keeping things calm, keeping any kind of an outburst, any kind of an emotional display is to be avoided and is a sign of weakness, really. And we need to just wait and move on, and hopefully people will feel better in a bit, rather than going, oh, God, what are you saying to me through this reaction that I've had? How are you coming to me? What needs to change in myself? What needs to change in the situation that I'm in? So I found it super, super helpful. And I cannot think of another situation where I've had my emotional buttons pushed more often than as being a parent.
Yes, I think we can all identify with that.
Oh my gosh, can they push buttons? So like, I think you don't realize how selfish you are until you bring these new creatures into the world who are even more selfish than you are, and they beat you over the head and beat that selfishness out of you with their own selfishness that they bring. I mean, it's just incredible. Obviously they have to be as babies, they like need something, they scream. And you just reorient your entire life around how do you care for these things. So certainly I've had a lot of practice doing that. I mean, even in the last week, perhaps in the last month, I can think of 2 occasions where my anger and frustration at all sorts of things, given lockdown 2 and rearranging Christmas and trying to do work through always being on screens and so on and never actually seeing people in person, all of that, it bubbled over once. It bubbled over at my youngest daughter, who was asking me for help whilst I was trying to solve something for somebody else, and I just couldn't cope. So that kind of pushed that I can't fix everybody's problems kind of failure button in me, and I just reacted in frustration and reduced her to tears. That was one. And then another one, literally just at the weekend, out running with Becky, and we were talking about a family situation, and she had a different opinion to me on something going on in my family, and it just felt like she was judging my family. And then when I tried to express my opinion, she talked quickly over me, and I was like, can't I even express my own opinion? You know, you can't just say no. Like, I'm allowed to have my own opinion. And we're just jogging along the street, and suddenly this stuff comes out, and I'm like, okay, that wasn't specifically parenting, but it was family. And you just go, instead of, I am learning not to beat myself up too much, but just go, look, you're a limited human being. You have limitations. You are under pressure. We're all under pressure right now. What was going on there? What was that really? all about. That actually had nothing to do with your wife, and it had nothing to do with my daughter, the one that I sort of snapped at. What was really going on? And it has helped me so much to realize how I'm wired, how sin's got a hold of me and wants to grab a hold of me. Not just that, but just that I'm not perfect, and I have weaknesses, and I have pains, and I have habits from the past that you've carried in. And it's just bringing that all to Jesus and saying, okay, Lord, I messed up. Thank you that you forgive me. Help me. I need your spirit. I need you to change me from the inside out. And on both those occasions, I after a different amount of time, I might add, I apologized to the individuals concerned and just said, that wasn't about you. That was about a whole load of other stuff. And Daddy didn't react well in that. And to my surprise, I actually find that owning up to my limitations and weaknesses and apologizing actually brings a stronger relationship than I would have had if it had never happened in the first place. And not only that, it also, I think, is a living demonstration that I'm not God, I'm not Jesus, and they need him, not me, really. I'm a pointer and a guide towards him, but I am not their ultimate need, and he is. And so, in my weakness, I am actually, God is bringing about some good. And I've read some really helpful stuff about neuroscience as well. Like when you apologize, you actually rewire your kids' brains, and any damage that had been done through what you had just said or not said, it just can no longer be permanent. The apology brings about a rewiring, and it actually helps their neurons line up in a healthy way, and it enables them to cope with being able to apologize when they get things wrong as well, because their worth or their identity doesn't all hang on them being right or perfect all of the time. So anyway, I may have strayed off the topic there, but God has taught me so much through it, and it's not just about parenting, it's about every aspect of life, but it's when you're parenting, like I say, that's when the buttons for me get pushed more than at any other time.
Yeah, and you can think that if you're quite an emotionally steady, you described yourself earlier as quite an emotionally steady level person, but as you say, that's the one, it can push us over the edge or like it just pushes our buttons. And it's great to hear that you've kind of learnt those tools through things like Emotionally Healthy Spirituality and probably other books and other experiences and other people in your life.
Yeah,
being able to use tools of self-reflection and say apology and just demonstrating that we're not perfect. And I love what you said about demonstrating to your children that actually you are not their ultimate need anyway. It's God that they ultimately is.
I mean,
he's the only perfect one.
Yes, as you know, I was saying earlier about being the only man, and you kind of can be tempted into thinking that you have all the answers.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a practical example of that. Like a few years ago, the girls were pleading with us, why can't we go to Centre Parks on holiday? We want to go to Centre Parks, take us to Centre Parks. Well, at the time for us, the answer was because we couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
Obvious, and you can be tempted to think, if I was a good dad, I'd be providing in a way that would enable us to go. But this must have been a God thing. I just had a moment of wisdom that said, girls, I'd love to take you to Centre Parks, but the truth is your earthly father doesn't have the money to do that, but your heavenly father does. Your heavenly father has no limits whatsoever. So you ask him. Why don't you ask him? You must pray to him and ask him for what you want for a holiday. So anyway, they duly do exactly that. They pray, can we have a holiday to Centre Park? And this is amazing. I'm so grateful to him for this. But within a week, literally days later, one of our family rang and said, Ben, we were thinking about next year and we wondered if we could take you and your family to Centre Parks with us next year.
Wow, I've just got chills. That's amazing.
What? And I take it or leave it for me for Centre Parks, really, but that wasn't the point. The point was God had shown my kids that
he listens
the real father that they need to know, and the real father who can supply their every need, is their heavenly father. And that's just huge. That has stuck with them, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And they've they basically approach holidays in that way from now on. They honestly don't think there's any limit. And we have been blessed, and they have been blessed individually and as a family in a number of ways with holidays since. So, I mean, they've got that lesson down.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Well, we've nearly come to the end of our time together, Ben, but I ask everyone that joins me in conversation about what things they would take with them on their journey of parenting if they knew at the start what they knew now. So when you're on that journey of, you know, oh, we're nearly there yet, that journey that children shout out at when they're little.
Yeah.
They shout out, oh, we're nearly there yet. Well, as parents, we're the ones on the journey. You know, when you were starting out as a dad, what essential items would you have taken with you on your journey as being a dad that you didn't really maybe realise at the time?
Oh gosh, well, I would say just if you've got a really nice car, a sporty one or something like that, just change it now. Just get the biggest car that you can afford.
Yep.
And add roof bars, you know, and a tow bar, or get all the options that you need to make it expandable, because you're just never going to have enough space. That would probably be one of the things that I would say. You can get a smaller, sportier one again later, you know, in 18 years time or whatever it might be. But
yeah, that's the plan.
Just go for flexibility. You know, similarly with a buggy, don't skimp on the buggy if you're starting out. If you've got babies, get a decent one. You know, you just want that. What else would I say? I mean, we have had so much. We have been given so much. Being part of the church has been so helpful. You need friends around you. You need small groups around you.
Yeah.
And share your moments, share your ups and your downs. We find that people want to help. We've been corrected in the past for not sharing soon enough. One time we had a car breakdown and we were a bit stuck. And I posted something on Facebook, just, you know, it wasn't woe is me, but it was just saying, you know, we're in this difficulty. And like, again, within days, someone within the church had organised for us to borrow their spare car.
Amazing, yeah.
And they brought it round and gave me a bit of a lecture about why didn't I go to them in the first place, or go to their small group. So it was a bit of a correction. Yeah, take people with you, and if you don't feel like you're yet in those kinds of relationships, then prioritize them and make space for them. That would be one thing. Yeah, one more thing that just comes to mind is just a mindset, and it does link back to boundaries. I think it's a quote from Henry Cloud. I'll probably misquote it. He wrote a book called Boundaries, which is just so helpful, whether you're at work or running a family or whatever setting it might be. And he just says this: you're far more in charge of your team or your group or your family than you realize, and you will get the culture that you either set or you allow. And as a parent, God's given you an incredibly huge delegated responsibility to raise this family, and he hasn't given that to your children. He's given it to you, and he's going to ask you about the culture that you'd set and what you had allowed. You know, we live in a world culture where I think kids have a bit too much of a say, perhaps at times. A lot of that is very good, and we don't want to go back to days when we didn't listen to them at all. Of course we want that, but taking with you that sense of, you know, it's up to me. I'm going to take responsibility for the culture that we have, and if I'm not happy with something, you know, whatever it might be, they're on their screens too much, or their relationship with food is really strange or odd or whatever. It's up to you. You know, you're the one who's going to help change that situation. Obviously, get wisdom, get help, and you may not be the person with the idea to fix the problem, but you're the one who's going to be coming before God and asking for help. You're the one who's going to be saying, this is not okay, is it? And naming that in your family. You're going to be the one setting those values that you want to live your family by. So yeah, bring that attitude that I am ridiculously in charge of this family. God has given that to me. As a dignified human being, he gives me that responsibility.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Ben, for your authenticity and for being so real and open and vulnerable in sharing, you know, some of the highs and lows, and, you know, just the messiness of family life, as well as just the pleasure and the joy that comes from it. Really appreciate you coming to talk to me this week.
No, it's been great. Lovely to chat.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening into that conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. It was great to be joined by Ben this week, so thank you, Ben, for your insight and wisdom. He mentioned a couple of books there. The first one is The 3 Big Questions for a Frantic Family, a leadership fable about restoring sanity to the most important organisation in your life, and that's by Patrick Lencioni. He also talks a little bit about the Emotionally Healthy Spirituality course. We run that course at Kerith, so you can check out our website, kerith.church, and there's various books around that subject, from leadership, emotionally healthy spirituality. Why don't you check those out? They're all by Peter Scazzero, Scazzero. So we hope you have got some great plans for Christmas. It's going to look a little bit different this year in our families, but we just pray that you have an absolutely amazing time wherever you are, wherever you find yourself, whoever you find yourself with, and we'll join you next year on Are We Nearly There Yet?